Hi, everyone. I am getting on here very quickly because, let's see, pardon, I'm like trying to get this. So, I hope everyone's having a nice Sunday. Sorry for I'm not very prepared. Don't have the makeup on. But I needed to get on because I don't really care, right? Like, I'm not here to look pretty. Anyway, I hope everyone is hanging in there today on Sunday. I usually have been kind of migrating over to a word blog because that's usually been the most efficient way that I can share my ideas and my thoughts. And again, you're probably thinking, what do we need with more commentary about anything that goes on in our world? And my life has rapidly changed in the past week. I won't get into details. It's kind of it's kind of hit out of left field, honestly. So I find myself with a lot more time on my hands. um, anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to comment. And first off, I want to say because I see a lot of the volatility with with rhetoric that is going on right now that is seriously troubling, and obviously we don't want to incite more volatility. Uh, I have always been somebody who promotes peace. I have somebody who believes that I believe that conversation is better than violence. Okay, I just recently heard someone, actually it was the person in question, who stated that the current commander, I don't even want to say that title, the current person who is at the top of our political thing in the United States right now, that they believe in conversation. And I honestly had to find that laughable. And you really do have to have two eyes in your head and two ears in your head to not to see how that is so not true. And I feel like we are in the twilight zone, honestly. I feel like there is this, and it's disturbing. I mean, I see things, it's like up is down, black is white, uh, just everything. It's like opposite day. I feel like we're living in an opposite day thing. And it is just, it's insanity. And I don't know what really has gone on or gone wrong in our society that that has caused uh, humanity to behave this way. I have my theories. Some of them are probably very far out there and woo woo. Some of them may be inappropriate to say because they are just speculative. But I do believe that I don't know what to say. I mean, when you can't look in a mirror and see that what you are saying is honestly absolute bullshit, I just don't know what to say. Um, it's very troubling that we have gotten and have reached this level of problems in our society. I don't really know what to say about that. Um, I mean, I get on here and I'm just kind of riffing it, right? Like I don't have a script. I'm a nobody. Nobody really listens to me. I don't have thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of viewers. I'm a big nobody, but I still have ideas. I'm still participating in civil discourse. Because I believe in that. I live in a country that was founded, even in theory, maybe not in practical terms, because we all know that this country has a lot of faults, right? But then in theory, that this country was based upon civil engagement and civil discourse. And that requires work. And it requires everybody to participate to some level. And I feel like our electoral system and our election systems and our political systems have degraded so much over the years that, people are too busy. We hate politics. People are just tired of the divide. They are apathetic about that their vote makes any change. And it is really distressing, because I think that we have forgotten the skills necessary and required in order to maintain a civil, humanitarian, democratic uh, society. And I really do feel like the United States experiment is failing. We are in I think, the death throes, honestly, of it. It's very disturbing and it's very distressing. And I really don't, um, because I don't really have that large of a voice, I know that I'm just going to get lost in a sea of other voices. Everybody's got an opinion. There's going to be popular people that are going to say things, and they're going to, be listened to. And, but I still feel it is important for me to participate. Maybe one person may hear me and it may resonate. Okay. I continually work on myself. I work on my ability to understand myself, where my faults lie. I've done a lot of work on myself. And, that really is a critical part of where we are going wrong, is that there's a lot of people who do not have enough insight about themselves, and not even just about themselves, but just about how things work, how propaganda works, um, uh, how they can be manipulated, and how people are manipulating them. And this is by design. I mean, people are, shy away from the idea of quote unquote conspiracy theories, because they're like, well, that's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's not dangerous, because conspiracy theories do in fact or exist. If you just go back into history, you can see there are things that happened that were in fact conspiracies. And I think that it's not healthy to deny or to really understand that there are powers that have interests and agendas that you may or may not believe in, or maybe so far out there you're like, well, that doesn't affect me, but it does. And it's just very important to have a rational understanding about that. You don't, a conspiracy theory doesn't have to be some wacky, weird, far out thing. I mean, it may sound, wacky to some, or maybe at some level, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, who would have done this? Who would have done this or that? And I understand that people want things to be normal, and people want to engage in things that make sense to them. And so they don't want to speculate, because, and you're right, some speculation is very harmful. Some speculation is not useful, but it's also, I think, harmful to deny the fact that there may be other factors in play. But that all being said, it is really important to understand those things, understand propaganda, understand about yourself, about influences, about your emotions, about advertising, marketing, propaganda, study Edward Bernays, study this, anything, right? It's critical to understand all this stuff. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't really like that stuff, so I don't want to study it. But then they go about their lives and they are engaging with the world in a way that is not giving them the full context of what is really going on. They're living their lives believing that, well, It's just these influences, that this doesn't have any factor. And so they ignore that. And I think that that's very dangerous. I think we have to consider things, and be rational, understand when we might, and granted, speculating something, um, we can say, I'm just putting this out there. Uh, I'm just putting something out there just to kind of like, because it's a possibility. But I don't think that enough people, I think, I think that our society is so distracted, and we have been very manipulated by social media, about the regular media, pardon me, that we're not really able to focus in and really pay attention and what has been going on. And I am sorry, but there are, and I'm liberal. Okay. Like, if you've watched any of my other videos, I keep having to say that, um, because what I say sometimes initially sounds like I'm defending this or that. And that's a flaw in people's thinking, right? Like, I'll say something like, for instance, and I'll use this example because it was a big example for me. I would listen to Joe Rogan, and I had a Facebook group that was very liberal. And when I mentioned a Joe Rogan podcast or an episode that he had, they attacked me. And they attacked me for promoting alt-right stuff, which was not, or being a Trumpster, and I was not those things. But they just wouldn't listen to anything. And I had actively pushed back when I heard people from my side, and I hate putting I'm very reluctant to use sides, because that is a trap. There, it's a dialectic. It's this left versus right. It's an oversimplification of how our society runs. It's convenient scapegoat to sit there and have left versus right. you know I know that I say I'm liberal because I believe in the world. Go look up the word liberal and you'll understand what it is, and why I don't shy away from that, because I do believe in freedom. It ultimately means freedom, to be free, to have free thought. Okay, so I don't shy away from it. You may say, oh, I don't like labels, but the word, I care about words, and I don't have an issue with being that. Okay. And ironically, if you look at, say, the word conservative, I'm actually conservative when it comes to like environmental stuff. I believe in being more conservative with our resources. So understanding words is really, really critical. And people don't do that enough. You know, um, we also make a lot of assumptions, myself included. I mean, we have to admit that we always have to include ourselves. None of us are perfect. Um, None of us are perfect. None of us, uh, none of us are perfect. None of us have perfect speech. Some of us misspeak sometimes, and we have to know when we have to correct it and go, "Oop, I misspoke," or "Oops, I was wrong." And that's hard a lot of the times to also say, to say, "Hey, well, I was completely wrong on that." Like, I learned something from this engagement, and wow, okay, that's hard for a lot of people to say. I make the mistake. I have ADHD. I'm the first person that is a horrible listener, and it's a skill that I always need to work on. And I will usually, if I'm engaging with somebody, I find that, several hours later, I'm going, oh man, why didn't I say that thing? Or I may miss something that they said, and I'm thinking, wow, I was really just off the ball, right? It's hard. It's very hard for me because I don't tend to be a very good listener at times. Um, I try to be. It's something that I always work at. It's a skill that I always do, but I'm not perfect. And neither are you. No one's perfect. But we always should strive every day to be better, do better. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in our world right now that aren't doing that. And I think that they are doing it deliberately. But again, like I'm saying, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone in terms of that someone can say things so hateful and then claim they're not being hateful or that they're being rational. And I'm like, you literally are not being rational. You literally just said something that's hateful or racist or despicable. So, for instance, and I will state for the record that I do not believe violence is the way to bring about a civil society. There's no place for it. That being said, I support the Second Amendment. I believe that everybody has a right to own a gun and responsibly utilize a gun if their lives are directly threatened. Okay. I support the Second Amendment. I don't believe that violent revolution solves problems. I think that especially now, I think that January 6th was a despicable act. I think I have my theories about why it happened and why it was allowed to happen. And, but I don't think it was helpful. And I think it was gross. And I think it was a horrible thing. And I don't believe that those people should have been pardoned at all. I think that they were representative of a very violent, angry element that needs to do a lot of the shadow work. And it terrifies me that they were pardoned because they were easily led into acting in a violent way because they, for whatever their reason, they thought that was the answer, and that isn't the answer. And people engage in violence a lot of the time when they feel pushed against a wall and they don't have any other recourse. And I think that sometimes those pressures that are put into our society are put there deliberately. I've always cautioned that people be very, very careful because I think that that is what the end result is. That ends result that people want violence because they want an excuse to be able to clamp down and declare martial law. And that's a very real possibility. I'm not saying don't engage in, political or civil, whatever, protest or whatever, because I think we need to. But just be careful that, there are false flags, there are people that start things, light that match, and they do it, and they're not that they are planted there in order to do that. And I think that you've got to consider that. None of this stuff's just like, oh, it's just some random person. I think that there are deliberate people that are trying to make major shifts in our society, major resets in our society. That and we have to consider that. We have to watch our backs. We have to be very careful. I know that a lot of people are like, well, you're out there talking and you're, making yourself a target. And, fortunately, I don't have any children. Pardon me. I have cats. I have cats. Okay. And somehow cat hair floats all throughout my thing. I need to brush them again. And it gets in my coffee. It gets in my mouth. It's gross. Ugh. So I'm sleeping, and in the middle of the night, I'm like sleeping with my cat. They sleep on my bed. I get cat hair everywhere. Ugh. Anyway, yay. So what was I saying? So yeah, so I think that we do have the right to peaceful, nonviolent protest. And I managed to go to a peaceful, just corner protest, holding up signs. Some of them may be a little provocative, but they weren't violent. But they certainly weren't supportive of the current person in the Oval Office right now, for obvious reasons. And for the most part, we got a lot of positive honking. But there were the handful of people who would drive by, and I noted they were mostly men. Not saying anything about men in general. I don't engage in that, but I'm just pointing out. And there may have been some women. And one of them that drove by issued a death threat. We were just standing there. We were just like, la da 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 da. We're, standing there holding up our peaceful signs, making our First Amendment rights, or engaging in our First Amendment rights. And someone drove by and yelled something at us, and it was a death threat. It's like, we're going to kill you, or something like that. And after the protest, some of the leadership of that group went to the police department, which ironically was right next door, and said, hey, we were out there protesting, and some people drove by and they said that they were going to go kill us. Apparently, the feedback they got from the police, that the police person that they talked to was not sympathetic. They were victim blaming. I don't know really what was said. They were asking, and apparently this police person had a body camera on, and they were saying all this stuff, victim blaming, and I don't know what else was. I wasn't there at that meeting. And when they noticed that the police had the body camera on, because I guess it was just, they said, can we please have a copy of this interaction? And they changed their tune real quick. And I think a lot of people are feeling very emboldened right now. They feel, for whatever reason, they feel that, wow, they're righteous. They've got somebody, and all this stuff that they feel like they've had to repress, all this hatred, all this anger, or whatever. And like, oh, it's the left, it's liberals, it's libtards. I mean, they have been fed a steady diet of this stuff. They said that projection, confession, accusation is confession, right? Like, sitting there projecting all this insanity, right? About the left, or about liberals and libtards. I mean, I've heard that since the 80s, right? I mean, I've been politically astute for, since about the 80s, when Reagan was in office. And so I've heard all this, and it's very frustrating. And I've been attacked. I went on an anti-apartheid protest in my city, which is a major city, and we were wearing our Catholic schoolgirl uniforms and holding our signs as we went down to this protest to protest to protest apartheid in South Africa. And there were white businessmen who were yelling some of the most hateful, horrible things at young girls who had Catholic schoolgirl uniforms on. I mean, they just didn't care. They're like, oh, you've got anti-apartheid signs, you like black people, and they yelled horrible things at us. So I've witnessed it, I've experienced it. And so, and I don't, I mean, I will admit that I've driven past Planned Parenthood, and in frustration, I will flip them off because they're all old white men, right? Like, I mean, again, I'm not trying to promote this idea that all white men are bad, but they're all old men. It's just a fact. I never see women at those things, and they're all old. They're all old, which is very weird, I guess because they've got time on their hands and that's what they do for a hobby. Maybe they're getting paid. Maybe they're getting paid. The right always wants to accuse the left of being paid protesters, but maybe these old men are being paid by groups to stand out in front of Planned Parenthood with their, anti-choice signs. But, I'm frustrated. I'm having a bad day, and I go, and I flip them off. Is it constructive? No, it's not constructive, but it's cathartic, but I'm not saying things, that, oh, I'm going to kill you or anything like that. I would never do that, because what's the point of that? Like, I wouldn't want to waste my energy or risk my freedom or risk my ability to ever to do that. Like, that's stupid. Like, I just don't believe it's worth killing somebody over your beliefs. I really don't. Um, the only time I believe that you really have a quote unquote right to end someone else's life is if your life is directly and immediately threatened. So if someone steps on my property and threatens me or threatens my property or whatever, and even if I've like given them a warning, said please leave my property, and they don't do it, or if I feel threatened, then yes, I may engage in something that may harm them because I feel harmed. Okay, I support that. I'm not going to let somebody roll over me and take away, my physical rights. But if there's an opportunity for me to remove myself from a situation that is getting violent, I will do so. Just because it's not worth it to me. I mean, I think it's worth it for me to speak up, to have a voice, to speak up for what I believe. I think we all have that right. I think that we should all engage in that right. I don't think we should be afraid of being able to speak up. And I understand that there's a time and a place where we need to be a little bit more strategic, that, engaging in something at a certain particular moment isn't probably worth it either. You have to be strategic. You have to be a little bit stealthy, just because the situation calls for it. It's kind of stupid to, get yourself arrested over some dumb thing, because you weren't reading the room or you weren't having situational awareness, and that requires some training. That requires awareness. It requires just, not allowing our emotions to kind of take hold. And we need to be, we need to have sovereignty and personal awareness over ourselves in order to have a free society. And that goes for anyone, left, right, center, I don't care. Because right now, what we do not have that. We have a lot of emotionality, and a lot of it, I'm sorry, I will sit there and say that it's on the right now. There has been, and I'm not saying that the far left, hasn't had incendiary language of their own. I get that. But I have observed this stuff for many, many years, and I do see a lot more hatred. I was born in 68. I was born in the 60s. And so I grew up and I saw the remnants of segregation. Uh, my mother came from, she wasn't from this area, and she came here. And so she, the people that she met, the city that we live in is very conservative. And, she joined a pool that happened to be to be segregated, right? It was a private pool. Wasn't a public pool, but it was privately owned. And at that time in the 70s, privately owned pools were not required to allow Black people in it. And I had a Black babysitter because my mother was a physician. And I remember my mother telling me that she had to write a letter allowing my Black babysitter to take me swimming. Now, I know some people were like, well, why didn't your mom join a different pool? And I'm like, I don't know. My mother was not a racist person, but it was just, it is what it is. You live in a society. I'm not going to, I'm not going to judge my mother for that, because my mother was she was for justice. She cared about people. She's not racist at all. Why is my phone making all this noise? So, I mean, so all you people on the left, like, why did you join that? Like, we eventually, my mother we ended up having our own pool so we didn't have to belong to a pool. And another pool that we joined, there was another private pool. Yeah, they were segregated for a time too. again, I'm not apologizing for my mother. We weren't bad people. It was what it was. And my point was that, I saw the end I still saw the remnants of segregation in the city that I grew up. And it's troubling. Um, it was very troubling, and it's bad. And I'm glad that we have seemingly moved on from that, uh, because it's bad. And I don't know, but the city that I grew up in had a lot of remnants, and it's one of those, half my family, my dad's side of the family, came from the South. It is what it is, and you have to kind of navigate that as best as you can, and you have to like look deep in someone's heart and see really where they lie. There's societal stuff that influences. I remember a show. It was on Phil Donahue, and a lot of these talk shows like Phil Donahue and what's his face. Anyway, Phil Donahue had I think it was Phil Donahue, had the KKK, they had a person on, and then they had a KKK member. And this is how they always used to always have, tension, and like, they always had these like kind of tense things. And this KKK person was saying horrible things about this black person that was on the show. And then like a year later, they were brought back on, and the KKK person that had been saying all this hateful stuff about this thing apologized to this black person and said, I was wrong. I had a transformation. And they came on and they apologized to this person, saying I was completely wrong. And I think it's because this person had been raised to believe that the world operated this way, and that these values and these beliefs were okay to have because they were in their own little bubble. They were raised that way. You have a choice. If you are raised in a very insular, um, you were raised up, you may be homeschooled, you may be going to a certain school that indoctrinates you into whatever values, saying that racism is okay, segregation is okay, that this, that, whatever belief that you are being indoctrinated with. And that goes for the, true for the left. Some people may be indoctrinated with certain beliefs on the left that may be inappropriate or maybe kind of not true. So how you are raised, you know, you get I think you would get a quote unquote pass to some degree, but there's a point where when you get out into the world, understanding and changing and becoming a more full human being. And this is what is so disturbing. I right around where I live is the Creation Museum with Ken Ham, and they had uh, a school fair, and they were streaming it on YouTube. And I was listening to this. Shut up. My phone is just binging and banging and booming. And Ken Ham, who is the head of AIG, which is Answers in Genesis, was being interviewed, and he basically said, yes, we understand that that you may be homeschooling your child, or you may be raising your child up to believe in creationism and these values and Christian values and all this other kind of BS. And that we've noticed that once they go out into the world, into another college, that they are, they have other values that they become in contact with that may not be, our values, right? And he said, so that's why it's really important for parents to vet each college and hire, institution, it may be a Christian college, but maybe they don't believe in young earth creationism. And so it's like, be careful, da 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 da. So it's like, I mean, they admitted it. They admitted the fact that they have to keep a closed, tight rein on their children and their people to continue to brainwash them into wrong beliefs or bad beliefs or whatever. And I mean, they outed themselves, and you can see that. And that is not healthy. That's not healthy at all. And that's a danger sign. It's a red flag in our society when you have people who are so indoctrinated that they come across something that is different than what they were taught, and they have cognitive dissonance. And a lot of that can cause some violence and some aggravation and emotional issues. And it's really critically important to kind of understand that. I think that we have to we have to discourage that kind of insular kind of bubble little groups. And we are in a very tribal place right now. We have been in a very tribal place. Social media has not been the magical place where everyone's going to be able to engage in healthy discourse, right? I'll be over on X and you can be over on Blue Sky, and we all go to people that believe like we do. We never are encouraged to go and engage in a healthy way with other people. Now, people would say that, well, that's what Kirk was doing. I'm like, was he though? I mean, it's funny because he was known as a debater, and he was going on college campuses and engaging in debate with people. But apparently none of that stuff sunk in, like someone would come and debate him, and apparently he never really had any kind of insight about anything that he was saying or that the other person was saying, like, hey, wow, yeah, you're right. I mean, so it's troubling because, yeah, you can say, okay, well, we want to engage in healthy debate. And so there's something else that's really going on that's allowing people to hold on to bad ideas and not be reflective of, like, oh, wow, maybe I'm wrong about that. Let me go and see if, in fact, my ideas are wrong, or maybe you have a point. So there is another component that's not being addressed in our civil discourse, that we are being allowed to continue to have bad ideas in our little circles, and that those are being like, oh, well, then that person was bad. Like, you were engaging in a bad discussion with that person, that you weren't wrong, even though if an objective third party person's thing is like, okay, that person actually was right. We're fact checking, bam, 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 bam. And then at the end of the day, you go, hey, these are your errors in judgment. These are the facts. These are whatever. And how this person goes away from that debate, do they have insight about themselves? Do they have insight about, and a lot of times that is not happening. And you have a growing army, literally, of people who think, I am not wrong. I'm never wrong. I can't be wrong because I've got these people that are fueling my ideas, that are saying, hey, you're right. You're right. Hey, we'll protect you. Hey, that person was nasty. And they don't have any reflective, they don't have any like insight, the fact that they technically are wrong. And that's a cognitive dissonance thing. And I don't honestly have any answers to how to fix that. It feels like we go back to our little bubble and we go back to our echo chamber and we're like, yeah. And then we just bathe into this, right? Like, oh, I know, yes, I'm right. And, oh, look, all these people are coddling me and saying, oh, you were completely wonderful and great and wonderful, and all your ideas are great and wonderful. And so there's no opportunity for, oh, well, let me look into that. And so there's something wrong with our society that is allowing that to happen. At a psychological level. And I'm very troubled by that. I don't have any answers as to how to fix that problem. And like I said, I'm always like, hey, yay, more conversation, which I still believe. I still believe that we need to have more conversation. We need to have more understanding, but you can't do that without doing work on yourself. Okay. And that may be where the problem is breaking down, is that psychologically we are being told we are always right. If we are raised up like you are, you're a good person and this is the way, and they're the enemy. Like if you're continually raised up to believe that, maybe that's where it's breaking down, um, maybe you weren't loved enough as a child or breastfed. I don't know. I was breastfed, but I didn't turn out like that. So I don't know, but it's just something to, really consider and maybe getting off of the political discussions and having just general conversations about our lives. That not every conversation we have with another human being has to be political. Maybe we'll find something. Maybe we'll go, yeah, but it's like, this is generational. So it's like, it just builds, but I feel like there's just something we're missing because people are not stepping away from a fracas political debate and having any insight about where they might have done better, where they might have wrong thinking, where they might, they're just so indoctrinated. And I think that unfortunately some people are they're too far gone and they're not ever going to be reached. And, it's very troubling. I'm going to go here because I've gone on longer than 30 minutes. I wanted to bring up about the troubling aspect of media, mainstream media. There was something that I heard with regards to mental health. I can't remember. Kilmeade is his name. Kilmeade. He's on Fox. And yes, I will admit that I have not seen the entire segment, but there was another gentleman, it was a black guy, I can't remember his name. He was saying about how a lot of mental health people, or like a lot of people, I guess he was referring to people who have like things like schizophrenia, don't like, I think he was even saying billions, but we don't put billions into mental health. We don't even we might put millions in there, but it's very patchworky. And I'm saying that as someone who supported that worked in mental health for 24 years. Okay. And the whole mental health thing is getting very scary right now because there are people who are justifying, so he's like saying, well, we put all these millions in there and these people, this is regarding that murder of the woman, the Ukrainian woman on a subway, which that's a whole other issue. But they're saying that these people don't, take the services and we don't, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the whole issue of mental health and where we came from and there were big, where we came from the 1940s and beyond and 50s and everything to after the 1980s when all of the mental hospitals were just opened up and all of these people were just set free because Reagan didn't want to pay for anything, right? Like they said, oh, well, because these hospitals were horrible things. You had massive, if you study the mental hospitals and all that other kind of stuff, they were horrible. They never had enough funding. They were just dumping grounds for anybody and anyone. There was husbands could dump their wives for hysteria. Whatever it was. And there was never enough money. To make sure that they were clean, well-staffed, nothing, right? So there was a lot of horrendous abuse. And and people need to really study this. Go study MK Ultra. Study a lot of this psychological and psychiatric research that was done in the 40s and 50s. Please go study that. You need to. There's several very good books about that. That's a really critical thing. The experiments that were done on people, it was pretty gross. It was very gross. And so that needed to be changed. And it was John F. Kennedy, I believe, who had stated that there would be some changes because his sister, Rose, that was Rose Kennedy, right, who had gotten a lobotomy because she acted differently, and it may have been due to a bad birth situation. And she was eventually given a lobotomy because that was the treatment at the time. So, he had influences to, just change the whole mental health culture and how people who had mental health treatment were treated, right? And so then I don't have really a timeline, but I do know that in the 1980s, because Reagan was this, I'm a fiscal conservative and we want to cut taxes and all this other kind of stuff. So they wanted to cut the funding for all of these state-run mental hospitals. And they dumped a lot. And the whole idea was, in some reason, to put them into case management situations or group homes or, into a more compassionate thing. That was the idea. That was the plan. But they opened the hospitals up and they dumped a lot of people out into the world that did not get the support they needed. And, that's what has contributed a lot to the homeless situation, to a lot of people who are running around our society that need a little bit more help than they probably do need, more of kind of like a hospitalization type of treatment. But it's because they have never really been well funded because, well, whatever. So we're not dumping millions in there. You want to blame it on the victim again. You want to blame it on the patient. And, is that true? I mean, a lot of stuff, it's like they're scrambling, there's not a lot of, a lot of these case managers have unrealistic case loads, so put your money where your mouth is. And we can see what has happened, since this person has become president. We know what Doge did. I don't know really what to say. You're literally just cutting all funding and saying, oh, well, it should be the states. And the states, a lot of the time, don't have money. The states, it's very patchworky. And depending on who is running and in charge, they don't want to raise taxes, so they're not going to contribute to it. And so there's a lot of abuse, and it's very patchworky. And so you used to have this quasi-federal state relationship, right? And now I'm very concerned because there's going to be far less money for the treatment, healthy, moral treatment, not an ethical treatment of people who have mental health issues. All that's being cut off. We've got money for war. We've got money for a ballroom at the White House. We've got money to change the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, but we don't have money to help the most vulnerable people. And this isn't about just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That myth is just like, let it go, people. It's like, yes, you're right. Everybody should have some level of self-reliance and personal responsibility. And, you're right. We should. Sitting around, but that's a myth too. I'm not saying people don't do that. They don't sit around, playing video games going, whatever, give me a handout. And, you're right. There are people like that, but that doesn't mean that everybody is like that. Right. And ironically, a lot of the red states are the ones that have the highest rates of people on disability or on social services, right? So, looking fiscally at this, and it's immoral and it's inhumane to sit there and just cut funding and not have a long-term plan. And I think that's by design. But the most important thing about that Fox News thing was that, so this person was claiming that we dump millions and millions and that it's the mental health people, it's these mental health patients that aren't taking the treatment and that they should be locked away. And then you go to the other person, Kilmeade, and he says, well, some of them we just may have to do lethal injections. And granted, maybe they were talking, I haven't watched the entire thing. I am sure that they were probably saying that if a person with a mental health issue murders somebody, that you should do lethal injection. Maybe that's what they were saying. And so maybe it was taken out of context. But I know for a fact that we are heading into very dangerous territory when you insinuate that, oh, okay, well, if someone who's got schizophrenia murders somebody, give them lethal injection. And it's like, instead of actually looking at, they're insinuating and they're putting up the argument that, oh, well, these people are unhelped. They don't want our help. So just kill them. That's basically what they're insinuating. And that's very dangerous because that literally, these people are saying, oh, well, they're just attacking everybody and calling them Nazis. And I'm like, that literally was what the Nazis promoted. If the shoe fits, wear it. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it might be a duck, and I think that needs to be pushed back on. And it's very unfortunate because there have been a couple of people in the mainstream news that have been fired because they were saying reasonable things like, if you talk about violence and violence happens, they were fired. So I'm wondering if Kilmeade is going to ever be fired for what he said, because that is very disturbing and distressing. That you would actually argue that, oh, well, I think we should just lethally inject these people and just forget it. That's leading to this idea that, mental health people or mental health patients and people with mental health problems, and already, and people, if you don't know this, there's probate, right? Like, people are probated because their mental health status is so decompensated that they do have to be in a basically a mental health lockdown situation. We have, so there are places where people go like, hi, I can't manage my life and I am a threat to society and myself. And it's they're they are the worst of the worst of the mental health patients that really just they just can't function. They are, in fact, probated and by a judge put into a more of a secure, more restrictive setting, right? They don't have the freedom to go and come and go. And so those exist, right? Like, those exist. And I don't know. I personally have one of my causes that I had hoped at some point in my life I would be able to promote more is the idea of mental health respite centers, where are places that are not full hospitals, not full restrictive settings, but are more, kind of halfway houses for people like, hey, I'm feeling like I need a little bit more support right now, and you can go to, and they're called mental health respite centers. And they've got them in North Carolina. There was one that's got a very good model. There's only one in Ohio that I know of. And I think we need more of those, because I think our society is becoming so overly stressful and very dangerous and hard to live, that I think people need a lot more support mentally. And we're not doing it. We're not going in the right direction. Like, we're taking that away right at the time when we need it the most. And it makes me really sad for our society that people are just thrown out there because they are dealing with a lot of stuff. I'm sorry. That we need to show more compassion. And I know that money is tight and there are people that are controlling the purse strings, but there's no support. You reach and you ask for help and there's no help. And that's sad. And there are people, I lost a family member to suicide this year. And I don't really know the full circumstances. Apparently, they actually had been in treatment. And yeah. But I think that we really need to. It's not merely the money; it's how the money is being allocated, how it's being spent, and the models in which that we are doing social treatment and social safety nets in this country are abysmal, honestly, in comparison to other countries. How we treat it's just amazing that we live in this, we're the United States, comes off as this, oh, we're so righteous and we're like the best country in the world, and we're not. We're not. And I think that is a big reckoning that we need to take. We need to look at this sins. I'm saying that quote unquote. It's just because lack of a better word. And we have to have a reckoning. And really come together and figure out how to heal, because I don't right now, how we're falling apart is just not good. and this fundamentalist, puritanical notion about people and their qualities and everything, it's just not good. We need to be the people that we say we want to be, that we are good people and that we love each other and we care. And if we consider ourselves Christian, to be actual Christians instead of being hateful, horrible human beings to each other. And I have seen good people do good things, and you are judged by your actions. You are judged, you are judged by your words and you are judged by your actions. And anyway, so with that, I will call it a night or call it a day. My day is just starting. Anyway, if you're seeing this, thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe. I may be able to be on here a little bit more, but I may also just be focusing a lot more just on vlogging or on blogging, excuse me. But anyway, have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. If I can turn this on. There we go.